Revolutionary greetings, comrades. We continue discussing the Zimbabwe Communist Party program as adopted in December 2019 at its first Congress in Bulawayo. We started with the arrival of the settlers in 1890. We've gone through up to the beginning of the trade union movement. We want to continue and look into the beginning of the nationalist movement. We are doing this briefly. We will not spend much time, and then we look into the armed struggle again briefly, because we are not doing a detailed account of the origins of the nationalist movement in Zimbabwe, and also are not giving a detailed account of what happened during the struggle for national liberation as led by the armies of ZAPU and ZANU, that is ZIPRA and ZANLA. So we will not go into detail, but we appreciate your comments. Some of you have been writing to us, sharing with us your views, and we do appreciate. As we said, this also is meant to benefit our friends, the friends of the Zimbabwe Communist Party, whether they are in Zimbabwe or they are internationally. Some have said to us that, Comrade Mabena, we are friends of the Zimbabwe Communist Party. These are Zimbabweans, but they are saying for one reason or another they do not to be identified as communists. We accept this. So we said, as you recall, that the African National Congress was founded in 1912 in South Africa, in Bloemfontein, inspired a lot of nationalists around the region, and also we were inspired, or our fathers, grandfathers were inspired by the African National Congress and the Communist Party of South Africa, then now the South African Communist Party. While we will not, as I've said, give a detailed account here, what we note though is that in the early stages of our liberation, that is the liberation movement, there were setbacks here and there, which affected the growth of the liberation movement. For instance, the Southern Rhodesian African National Congress had to be revived in 1934, and it went a bit quiet, and revived again in 1945, and sometime it was known as Southern Rhodesian Bantu Congress. But we do point out in our program that our lack of detailed knowledge on this is an indictment on us in terms of the historical research that is needed. Maybe ourselves as the communists and the academics, historians for that matter, we have not spent time in researching about how the liberation movement emerged in Zimbabwe, and of course the understanding of economic, political and social developments in our country, both during the colonial period and since independence, are little understood by most of our intellectuals and academics, and of course by less of our population. This has led into ZANU-PF simplifying and modifying our historical narrative in its favor in such a way that many of our younger people, in light of the failures of our post-independent governments, have rejected the concept of liberation entirely. Remember, we are saying as the Communist Party that we need to complete the liberation of Zimbabwe. This is why our program is titled Completing the Liberation of Zimbabwe. In completing the liberation of Zimbabwe, we need to understand what happened. Part of our vanguard role, of course, as the Zimbabwe Communist Party, is to encourage the restoration of our historical narrative in its entirety, relating the internal to the external factors, and viewing the world through critical lens of historical materialism. And we appreciate the work that is done by ex-ZIPRA combatants who continue to give us a historical accounts. There is indeed a WhatsApp group where ex-cadres of ZIPRA are giving a historical account of what happened, and we hope that these are going to be documented by our young people. And the old Southern Rhodesian African National Congress emerged out of the mist in 1952 after Joshua Nkomo became chairman of the Bulawayo branch. Like I've said that there were of course setbacks in the early years of our liberation striking, and we also recall when we're discussing the rise of the labor movement in Zimbabwe, about the strikes in 1948, but also in 1948 in South Africa, the electorate had rejected the pro-British Jan Smuts and elected a hardliner Afrikaner D.F. Malan. And the British government and the Rhodesians came up with a plan to build an alternative to South Africa by organizing a British-controlled Federation of Southern Rhodesia, that is Zimbabwe today, Northern Rhodesia, Zambia, and Nyasaland, Malawi. So what was basically happening is that when the English or the pro-British were English lost the election in 1948, the British was then looking for an alternative to South Africa. Hence, later on, the establishment of the Federation, the Federation of Rhodesia, Nyasaland, from 1953 to 1963. The Federation was established from 1953 to 1963. Of course, in those early stages, when there was a discussion around the establishment of the Federation, there were divisions within the liberation movement, to an extent that some did not trust the late Dr. Joshua Nkomo, was invited to Britain to participate in a conference which was discussing the Federation, was accompanied by journalist Jasper Savanu. When they arrived in London, they found themselves referred to as stooges by both other Africans and the British left, because to them, the broader African society and the British left thought that, or they were of the view that Dr. Joshua Nkomo was agreeing to a federation. But at the conference which they attended, Nkomo spoke out against the federation, and he and Saban walked out. On their return, Nkomo had his passport taken away, and he and the Southern Rhodesian African National Congress began to gain credibility among the masses of the African people of the region. And of course, the irony today is that many African nationalists believe that in the longer term, rejection of the federation was a mistake. But of course, there are those again who hold a different view from this. And of course, as we are saying that there were setbacks in the early stages of the liberation movement. There were splits and differences that emerged in the trade union movement in Southern Rhodesia. The splits and differences began to emerge. But while these splits and differences were happening, the trade union movement in Southern Rhodesia was continuing to grow as the economy was expanding and taking on more workers. So more workers were getting into industries. By 1955, young working class men in Salisbury, which is now Harare, notable James Chikerema and George Nyandoro, formed the City Youth League. They were inspired by the ANC Youth League in South Africa. I'm not sure whether in 2022 young people of Zimbabwe are still inspired by the ANC Youth League in South Africa. That's a discussion for another day. I see them getting inspired by some who were like us but who are not us. I will not get into this debate for now. So they organized in 1956 a bus boycott on the grounds that bus fares took up between 1/3 and 1/2 of workers' wages. The boycott was well supported and lasted for 3 days, which a commission was established which improved the fares. So that was the first real achievement by the City Youth League when it participated in the bus boycott. The City Youth League changed its name to the African Youth League and entered into talks with the remaining operative branch of the Southern Rhodesian African Congress in Bulawayo. By that time, it was led by the trade unionist Joseph Msiga, who was vice president in Zimbabwe, who died in 2009 as vice president, and also it was led by Jason Ziapapa Moyo, JZ Moyo. The result was that in 1957, the two organizations united to relaunch the Southern Rhodesian African National Congress as a genuinely national party covering all parts of the country. The ailing Benjamin Burombo also told his followers in the African Voice Association to join the new organization. Remember, when we were discussing the beginning of the trade union movement, we spoke about Benjamin Burombo and said we regard him as the grandfather of Zimbabwe. At that time, Joshua Nkomo was the president of the Railway African Workers Union and was asked to become president of the Southern Rhodesian African National Congress. For the first time in its history, Zimbabwe had a militant fighting nationalist party led by workers. And as we will know, later on, the liberation movement was hijacked. But at its inception, we see the role played by workers organized under the trade union movement. So the workers in Zimbabwe established the National Liberation Movement, which of course was hijacked. And again, workers established the Movement for Democratic Change in 1999 after the introduction of the Economic Structural Adjustment Program in 1991. But of course, it was hijacked. Today it's yellow and so forth, but it's a discussion again for another day. But when the Southern Rhodesian African National Congress was launched, one of the its key weaknesses was that it did not have a coherent ideology. Remember, at this stage, there was no communist party, even though we spoke about that were not the communist party to have been established. A communist party was established from 1941 to 1949. So the workers' movement, as it was establishing the liberation movement, did not have a theoretical guidance from a communist party. This also happened in 1999, when workers established the movement for democratic change, there was no communist party to guide or to provide a revolutionary theory in the formation of either the liberation movement as early as in the 1950s, and also recently in 1999. At first, the Southern Rhodesian African National Congress was able to win a number of concessions from the liberal white Prime Minister Garfield Todd. And I'm sure that the comrades won't remember also the daughter of Todd, who has written a number of books. You know that after Garfield Todd resigned or was removed as Prime Minister, that he went through challenges under the Rhodesian government, forcing her daughter to join the liberation movement. So at the time, the Southern Rhodesian African National Congress indeed was able to get the Garfield Todd's government to agree to a minimum wage, and this was done as an attempt to bring more and also Garfield Todd was trying to bring more Africans into parliament, and this led to his party removing him from office in 1958. So the right-wingers in his party did not agree with the political views in terms of bringing or on the question of a black majority or the involvement of blacks in decision making. So he was then removed. Of course, despite the banning of the Southern Rhodesian African National Congress, the first modest step towards armed struggle was made when 6 people led by Mark Ziramasanga were sent by the Southern Rhodesian African National Congress to a newly independent Ghana for military training. And after 6 months, J.Z. Moyo went to Ghana to attend their pass-out parade. When you read our history books, when you listen to the ZANU-PF narrative, the liberation struggle started in Chinhoyi. The first shots were fired in Chinhoyi, which of course is not accurate. When J.Z. Moyo arrived in Accra, he discovered there was a Zimbabwean teaching at the college. That was Robert Mugabe, who J.Z. Moyo then recruited into the liberation movement. But of course, we know that later on, Mugabe and others in 1963, as we discussed, split from ZAPU to establish ZANU. But at the time when the ZAPU split, he was the secretary for publicity in ZAPU. The Southern Rhodesian African National Congress was banned in 1959, but was replaced by the National Democratic Party (NDP) in January 1960. The NDP was banned in 1961, but was replaced by the Zimbabwe African People's Union (ZAPU) within a few days. And it was then that ZAPU leadership said if they were going to be banned, they were no longer going to change the name ZAPU. We know, of course, that later on ZAPU joined the UNITA Court in 1987 and then pulled out of the UNITA Court, though it's contested, but pulled out of the UNITA Court in 2009. Again, is a discussion for another day. So this is a brief discussion on the history or on the beginning of the liberation movement in Zimbabwe. In the following video, we will also briefly discuss the armed struggle in Zimbabwe and then get into the elections of 1980 and analyze the first decade of the majority rule in Zimbabwe, and continue to ask the question, what went wrong? Because there are some comrades who think that from 1980 to 1990 Zimbabwe was a socialist state. They think that the collapse of the economy is caused or was caused by socialist policies that they say were implemented in the 1990s. So we want to have this discussion as we continue to discuss the program of the Zimbabwe Communist Party. Please write your comments. I know that you might have some views, or you might want to contest what we are presenting. As communists, we are free to engage. We cannot run away from engaging, and they will not label you. As long as we engage respectfully, we will do so. Please like the video, subscribe. I am Mabuto Nicholas Mapena, General Secretary of the Zimbabwe Communist Party. Amandla.